Hi guys. The economy is going through a period of sustained economic retraction. That's economists speak for a recession. We won't likely know for certain that we have been in a recession because by definition a recession is a look back in time, but by all indications we are likely in a recession right now. People hear the word recession and immediately they think back to 2008. There's that recency bias that they remember the last recession. I've seen this movie before, they say. But there's a lot of differences between what's happening now and what happened in 2008, and I want to touch on that a little bit insofar as it affects the housing market. So in 2008, the recession was actually driven by the housing market. There was a housing crisis. There was a lot of things going on in the housing market that wound up triggering a recession to the entire economy. This time around, things are a little bit different. The fundamentals of the housing market in 2008 were just completely out of whack. There was a supply and demand meltdown. There were a lot of things going on in the mortgage market that contributed to folks getting loans that they never should have gotten, and people just turning a blind eye or actually being blinded by greed in the banking sector. And that's what brought the economy down in 2008. So, like I said earlier, you've maybe saying to yourself, I've seen this movie before. But it's not the 2008 movie you've seen. You may have seen something similar, and in fact, most experts are saying that this is a lot more like the period of time in the early 2000s when there was a dot-com crash and then followed up by the events of 9/11. David Rosenberg, the chief economist with Gluskin Sheff and Associates, says, "What 9/11 has in common with what is happening today is that this shock has also generated fear, angst, and anxiety among the general public. People avoided crowds then as they believed another terrorist attack was coming and are acting the same today to avoid getting sick. The same parts of the economy are under pressure: airlines, leisure, hospitality, restaurants, entertainment, consumer discretionary services in general." So let's review what happened to home values during that time. The S&P dropped 45% between September 2000 and October 2002. Home prices appreciated nicely at the same time. So the question is, how long will this pandemic last? The answer is, no one knows for sure. It depends on how long it takes to beat this virus. Goldman Sachs anticipates we will see a difficult first half of the year, but the economy will recover in the second half. This quote here is from Wells Fargo. Goldman Sachs' advice aligns with this projection from the Wells Fargo Investment Institute. They say, once the virus infection rate peaks, we expect a recovery to gain momentum into the final quarter of the year and especially into 2021. So here are my thoughts on what we can expect to see. To start, let's get back to the fundamentals I mentioned before. There are three factors that will determine how the real estate market performs in the future. The first factor is the housing supply. Prior to the coronavirus hitting, we were still in a significant housing crunch. If you look at the number of existing home sales today, we are currently at a generational low. Housing supply comes from three sources: resale homes, new construction, and foreclosures. Atom Data Solutions recently released a report that shows that people are living in their homes for a lot longer now than they did back in 2000. In fact, on average, people are living in their homes for 8 years now, as opposed to 4 years back in the year 2000. There are fewer homes for sale now at any given time as a result of this. New construction also hasn't kept pace with demand. In fact, here in Merced County, up until just recently, building permits were drawn only a handful at a time for the course of the last several years. And foreclosures, I don't think, are going to do much of anything. The Federal Housing Authority and the federal government have put stopgaps in place to keep the foreclosure market from being flooded the way that it was back in 2018. I just don't think that there's going to be a significant foreclosure event occurring here in the next several years. The second factor is demand. Between 2005 and 2019, 13.7 million households were formed in the United States. Merced County remains one of the fastest growing counties in California. So the question is, where is everybody living? Since 2016, the number of new owner households has far exceeded the number of rentals by quite a large margin. Governor Gavin Newsom has said that increasing the housing supply is a #1 priority of his because of the issue at hand. However, very little has been done to solve the problem. Here locally, the Merced Sun-Star recently reported that there was a 1% vacancy rate amongst rental properties. I find it hard to believe that the demand, though on pause at the moment, will cease once the coronavirus passes. And I wouldn't be surprised to see demand increase as people start looking for a more stable investment than the stock market. The third factor at play here are home values. So if the supply of homes is unlikely to rise and yet the demand remains insatiable, it only goes to support the law of supply and demand to think that housing prices and housing values will remain at least steady, if not increase, once we get through the pandemic. Let me leave you with this last little bit of information. Home prices have appreciated during 3 of the last 5 recessions. And we already talked about the fact that 2008 was a recession driven by the housing market and home prices dropping. And if you exclude the 2008 recession and look at the previous 4, there are steady increases in 4 of the 5. The only period that saw a slight decline was in 1991, and it was less than 2%. And of course, we know that since the 2008 recession, home values have rebounded, remained strong, and continue to be a great investment. Hey, thanks for paying attention. Thanks for watching today. I appreciate it. I hope that you're all staying safe, washing your hands, wearing a mask if you go out into public, and we're going to kick this thing. The United States is a strong group of people. Stay strong.